What's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to be answering a viewer question, and that question is, what makes DIVA sound analog? What is analog, and how do I make it sound more analog? Because there's varying degrees of analog, obviously. So, obviously, DIVA is a VST, so it's not a analog synth, it's a VST, but it kind of captures the essence of analog synths from back in the day. The D in DIVA stands for dinosaur, which is interesting, right? Doesn't it? What does it stand for? Yeah, it stands for dinosaur impersonating a virtual analog synthesizer. That's pretty clever, right on the website there. And what makes it special is obviously, it emulates, a particular Moog, and some MS-20ness and even a JP8080, classic synth. But this was based off the Juno. Anyway, I want to stick with triple VCO just for this example. So what makes it analog? Okay, so analog is, the flavor of analog is in a lot of things, and it's a mixture of the waveforms, what the waveforms are doing, the filter feedback, filter saturation, and the envelope curves. And this kind of has it all, but there's some more stuff going on under the hood that I'm going to show you. If we look at, let's say, Surum, for example. So Surum is a wavetable synthesizer, but it has some, I guess, analog inspirations in its wavetable. So we can go into the analog thing here, basic Moog. Here we have, the variable, what is it? Triangle to saw to pulse to pulse, and all the things in between. But this doesn't necessarily make it sound convincingly analog, right? This will take us part of the way there, but it's really how the pitch behaves. This is a perfect recreation depending on the note that you're playing with the init preset. So every time you hit a note, it is essentially the same, even especially if you have the phase set to not random and the phase set here, right? Sounds the same every note we play. Analog synths don't behave like that. And even if you put in some clever circuitry to mitigate that, it still kind of sounds like that. Analog synths need to be tuned, and they react weirdly to heat and all that. And as opposed to Surum, which is all, digital, play this frame at a certain frequency and repeat it depending on what key it is, it'll be the same frequency every single time. With DIVA, it's a little bit different because they're taking it from the analog realm. This is not digital, it is analog, and there's variations through the series of capacitors, resistors, and triodes and diodes and all that fun stuff. There's subtle variations in the actual pitch that will occur over time. This is called oscillator drift, and it happens, especially in, say, like like you take like the older, like, I guess, Soviet or like East Germany analog synths that they had, which are quite popular these days. You take those and you turn it on, you can play it, but then as it sits there on, starts to heat up, temperature affects resistance values, there's no compensation within, and it starts to do some wacky stuff, and it starts to pitch drift a little bit. So this pitch drift behavior is somewhat emulated within DIVA. So I'm just going to hit the notes here. Oh, wait, that's not DIVA, that is Surum. The blind listening test there. I'll turn off the lag, boost the cutoff, bring the decay down, turn off that effect. Okay. Right. Subtle variations in there, and how you dial that in is what makes the synth very productive for more interesting basses, and what makes it capture the essence of analog synthesizers is this little tap down here. So this is the oscillator voice detune. So don't get freaked out by this. Think of this as a value offset for pitch. And it can do, other things as well. But if I hit a note, right, we'll notice that there's a little bit of a sequencer here, right? So when you hit a note, you will be able to, that voice is then put into this oscillator detune module. If I hit two notes, it'll kind of do that, right? Right, the original Moog is not polyphonic, but you get the idea. Each voice sequentially is put through this, and it is then affected by these offset values here. So this is oscillator 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, and these are values that you use to detune it, and you offset these things. So actually, this waveform isn't. Oh, I'll turn that up. So each note we're pressing is kind of changing in its pitch. And also, these are free running oscillators. They're running all the time, and what makes the volume kind of go through is the amplifier stage. Like, these are always going. So keep that in mind also. How you control the amount as per each of these voice detune is the detune amount here. So we can crank that. So now this is like a multiplier. And I'll just turn on one voice here, or one note, sorry. Right, it's kind of moving around a little bit, and this is how these oscillators work in the real world, like the vintagey ones. The new ones are pretty clever. They're controlled digitally and all that fun stuff. Right, but if you have it subtly, right, each note is affecting the pitch here. So I'll move that up, have that more centered. Right, so this is being, controlled. Pitch is changing, as opposed to Surum, which is just a, I don't know, what do you call it? Kind of like a one-to-one for each note. This one's different. So when you stack these together, you have independent detune for each note. I guess you get the idea here. And with the phase not in alignment, or the phase not resetting, there's ways to go about that. Little tricks, you'd actually sample it. But anyway, so that's besides the point. You get this going on, and you can get some really interesting results. Right, it's still close enough to that the proper pitch and tuning, but it's just off enough that it sounds more interesting, and it's subtle and good. So voice drift is if you hold a note, it will kind of move around in pitch over time. The pitch tracking is off. And there's, extreme and not extreme levels of this. And you could do all sorts of fun stuff with that. So this would, I guess, signify a synth that you'd probably want to get serviced, or tune with the test tone that's within, and that's all well and good. So that's an important kind of part there. I'll turn that down a little bit. Right, so what makes an analog synth a little bit more analog is there's inherent, how to make DIVA more analog as opposed to the voices, the filter. Filters are very important they're very important in general, but they're very important when you want to model them in an analog way. They behave very weirdly, The multiplier filter is an interesting one, and it's not so much how it behaves, it's the amount that you're feeding into it. So I'll just boost that. Right. And I really like doing this. This is super fun for me. And, this is one of the main appeals of the analog world is how the filters behave. Analog filters are pretty neat. So how they behave when you extend beyond what they're kind of meant is called feedback. And feedback is, think of this as like it's not so much a boosting of the gain before you stuff it into the cutoff or the filter. It comes from a time when the filter had an external in. So what they would do is they'd have the output of the synth go back in to the filter itself. So you get like double time, and it would be pretty crazy. And this is kind of hard to emulate in the real world. No, not the real world, in the digital world, because of delay. And if you get delay, you'll get phasing and stuff like that. So these filters are zero delay, quote unquote. They do some clever things so that the feedback is instantaneous, like in the real world, excluding the laws of nature. So feedback is not so much gain. Feedback is taking the output of the filter and then stuffing it back into itself. So feedback is super cool, and what it does is it offers you some smudginess, and it's really fun to kind of dial in. Right? So more feedback equals more better. More feedback equals more analog. So a lot of these different systems put in together will help you achieve the sound that you might be looking for. So when you boost the emphasis, it boosts the cutoff point. Right, and you can get a nice kind of smudginess going on there. And that's just with one of the kind of voice generation tools. Triple VCO. There's other ones, which would be kind of be like a kind of a, I don't know, different flavor with the pulse width. It's classic there. This is also a classic with the sub oscillator, just doing some gnarly stuff. Right, still the detune. The Juno also had some, gnarly detuning stuff here. Right, and the filter reacts to feedback in that way. So basically, yeah, moral of the story is you can get your bass lines, especially the ones that are arpeggiated, you can get them to do some cool stuff. Right, something like that. Right, stuff like that. And with the trimmer section, the detune amount, detuning all these oscillators plus their phase constantly not being lined up, you'll get a really good result. As opposed to kind of like this. which is pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I hope you learned stuff. And here's a scope. Right, all well and good. Oh, so maybe I should, yeah, let's do this. Maybe I can actually demonstrate what it's doing. Right, so we got that little drifty drift thing going on there. Also, the scope, it automatically scales it, I think. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that video. I hope you learned stuff. Take care and have a good one.